Welcome back to my garage. Um, Different angle though. Usually I have you facing the other wall. Got the trainer behind me here, so a little bit different of a view. Today, kind of figured do more Q&A style. Um, Kind of going over my plan for Unbound, just how I'm going to prepare for it from a logistical standpoint, maybe a little bit training standpoint, and then also just kind of go over the realities of trying to build a privateer program while working full time. I've kind of touched on it a bit previously in videos, but we'll try to put it a little bit more concise, focus mainly on Unbound because of how intensive of preparation is required for this race. So let's hop right into the Q&A. So planning required, I am probably overly prepared. Honestly, if anything, it probably bites me. Um, Probably induces some more stress than I need to when things are out of my control. I get sea otter. Packet pickup was an absolute nightmare to try to figure out. And in reality, I should have just been able to take a step back and be calm. But I struggle with that. That's why I try to plan as much as I can. So for me, planning, it starts with packing list to making sure I have everything I need, and then also any backup parts that I might need. And this is where I probably do go a little bit overboard. Like I'll bring an extra set of pedals or extra seat clamps just because you never know. And even though a lot of the parts you could probably pick up at the race, like I don't want to risk any downtime like that. So your tools, your spares, just overall equipment. Planning all that preparation is key, making sure your bikes are in running order. Now that I have both mogs, I'll most likely bring both of them with me to Unbound. So then I'll be able to have separate tire choices. The drivetrain's different, one being mullet, one being Explorer. So having the two bikes will kind of allow me to have some bit of flexibility. Obviously, the Creamsicle's my race bike, but if push comes to shove, like I have my tan one still. Nutrition. This year I'm sponsored by Carbs Fuel, so been using their drink mix and their gels. But with a race as long as Unbound, you're bound to want some solid food. So planning all that, and planning, um, for some just in cases, in case it's taking you longer in a segment than you would have thought, in case your stomach is not cooperating the way you will, or just overall cravings. Like in the past, I've been less hungry or more hungry in terms of wanting solid food. So whenever I'm picking up my musette bag, always have a little bit of differing stuff in there. Like last year, I had my gels and my bottles, but then I had some like Cliff Blocks or chews, but then I also had some like real food. Like I always have a candy bar in there, or like a cosmic brownie, oatmeal cream pie, something like that that I'm gonna have to look forward to, and kind of gives you a little bit of a morale boost. So stuff like that. And then kind of transitioning that your SAG crew. I've been very fortunate to always have my parents be able to crew for me. This year I don't fully know what I'm going to be doing. My dad's planning on racing the 100 again, so I don't know what I'll be doing for a crew yet. But that's going to be part of the planning that goes into it is, ensuring that you have a solid crew, ensuring they know what to do when you're coming through. They're able to identify you as also I'm able to identify them as you're entering the feed zone. And then also be able that they're ready for mechanical support. So kind of going off the equipment and tools, making sure they have everything they need that in case I have any issues, they're able to fix it right away and minimize downtime. So for planning, that's kind of everything. We've talked previously in other videos about some of the resources I use for that type of stuff, my Google Sheets and all that. So I definitely recommend watching some of my previous videos on that if you want more information. But in terms of planning, that's everything that goes into it. Okay, so how does training differ? For a race like Sea Otter that you knew was going to be quite high intensity with all the climbing that you had, we were focused very heavily on VO2 stuff, especially those 2 to 4 minute efforts, because that's kind of what the climbs are going to look like. For Unbound, you're training for an 8 to 10 hour race, best case. So you have to ride those long distances. You're going to be doing For me, a lot of 6 to 8 hour rides as time allows. Some of those will be just endurance. Some of those will include intervals. One that we've kind of used as a bit of bread and butter over the years is just a tempo at the end of the hour. So you do 40 minutes of endurance, 20 minutes tempo, 40 minutes endurance, 20-minute tempo, so on, so forth. Varying between 6 and 8 hours, and that's a good one. We'll also do some hard start ones, so doing some VO2 efforts to begin, and then having intervals later on, whether that's sweet spot tempo, threshold work, or then maybe even finish with some VO2. So really just trying to train that durability and repeatability over long periods of time. The biggest thing holding me back is just time, is the ability to do those long rides, because I do think the more you do them, the better it is. Obviously, you have to be able to recover, but you're training for a long race. You got to be able to do those long efforts, and that's why I tried to do a few more over the winter, even if they were on the trainer. I think you really got to get as many of those 6 to 8 hour rides in if you expect to be able to withstand race pace for 8, 9, 10, maybe even 11 hours if conditions aren't great. All right, resources I use. Like I said, previous videos, look at my organizational documents that I use on Excel or Google Sheets. I use those very heavily. Training Peaks I use obviously for managing my training, workouts, all that. My Athlete's Food Coach is where I track all my nutrition. I started tracking nutrition very closely. I've always kept a eating log and I've had a pretty good sense of what I was eating, but over the past year, I've really tried to dial that in to be at a proper race weight and just make sure I'm fueling correctly. So I use Athlete's Food Coach to track all my food. It's a big one. I think it's very important now to track your food if you are an elite athlete. It's not a marginal gain. I think it's a true game changer to be able to do that and understand what you're doing. I'm able to get all my carbs, fuel for rides planned. You have full historical data to know what's working, what isn't. So yeah, in terms of resources, pretty minimal resources that I use, but I use them to their fullest, and then also I adapt them to what works for me. All right, budgeting for Unbound. I think I touched on a little bit with Sea Otter, just what that cost me to be out there for the week. Realistically, probably a $2,000 or $3,000 week to be out there for that race when it was all said and done. I am solo. I'm a privateer. I'm fortunate to have great sponsors. Some are able to help with product. I do get a little bit of financial support, but obviously not enough to pay the bills. So I'm still working a full-time job and still pretty much paying my way, almost 100% to go to races. So for Unbound, it's no different. And I think one of the most difficult things with Unbound is true availability. Sea Otter, you have multiple cities around you that you could stay in that help keep costs, relatively low. Considering we did go for a week, it was a little bit more borderline of a vacation. Kind of same thing when we went to Europe. Like, it's hard to fully count all of that because we were there for 2 weeks. The race is only a week's worth of the trip. But for Unbound, because you are so limited in hotels and Airbnbs, like, prices are skyrocketing there. And me personally, I wonder at what point is that race alone going to become financially not realistic? And I honestly think we're kind of getting there. I'm lucky enough to be able to stay at an Airbnb with someone we've stayed at previously in previous years. They just built a new barn dominium that we're able to stay at and getting a relatively good deal, but it's still expensive. I mean, you look at hotel costs now. If you're going to stay for the full week, you're looking at well over $2,000 just for a hotel room. And even if you're not there for the full week, you're doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, those nights are so prorated that you're still spending, we'll say $1,500 to $1,600 to be there for 3 nights. So for me to be there the full week and get everything, in terms of acclimation and just comfortability and all that, really not that much more. So yeah, you're looking at hotels now are, close to 500 a night. You know, for those weekend nights, Airbnbs are, multiple thousands of dollars. So if you're able to split with people, great. But, you're still limited in, room. And yeah, you can camp, you can do the dorms. But like, again, those things are all super limited. They can be hard to book. So, I would say comfortably, most people are going to have to spend, $1,000 to $2,000 for lodging. That's a big chunk of your budget. If you're just an average guy like me, I drive, which, we'll say gas is 4 to 5 tanks. With gas prices the way they are now, you're looking at, 150 to 200-ish for gas. Food for the week's a couple $100. Entry fees a couple $100. Race nutrition's a couple $100. I don't have a rental car, which I did at Sea Otter, which is obviously nice. That's saving a couple $100. But it's not unrealistic to see Unbound me in a $2 to $3,500 weekend when it's all said and done for most people. Once again, you can do it cheaper. I'm not saying you can't, but when you are trying to race at this level, there's certain things that you just can't skimp on. I think, for myself, I know I can't skip on housing. I can't skip on getting there early, getting comfortable in my space. I usually do a pre-race massage. That's, $100. Nutrition, all these stuff that I don't like to skimp on. Spare parts that you just never know. I don't like to skimp on. And, that's just me. Once again, that's just me personally. That is that way. I would rather spend those extra couple $100 and not feel like I, handcuffed myself for any reason. But yeah, it's still, like I said, you're still getting $2 to $3 grand for one weekend. So, for me, I'm 2 races into the year. Realistically, I'm $6 grand in the hole. And, and paying for these races realistically is just coming out of my 9 to 5 paycheck. It's could be hard to swallow. So trying to make that work is difficult, and that's where trying to find sponsors is super important. And for me at the level I'm at, trying to get those good results to take me to that next level where, maybe I'm not getting a paycheck from racing, but at least I'm not spending as much racing. So financially, I'll be transparent with you. It's extremely difficult. And as it's getting harder and harder, that financial strain gets worse and worse. So you just kind of have to take it race by race at this point. And yeah, not much more to say on that. Unbound budgeting, finances, they're getting difficult. Lastly, the realities of trying to run a program like this while working full time. Obviously, just touch on it. Finances. It's expensive. It's hard to race. The new bike, the Creamsicle. I'm very fortunate to have great partners that were able to help a lot. Still an expensive build, but I was saving separately for that, kind of knowing I wanted that to be my princess. That's a big one. But truthfully, time. Like, time is the biggest expense, time and flexibility. For me, I have to do long rides, but I'm working Monday through Friday. And yeah, I'm able to get off work relatively early because I work manufacturing hours. But I'm still realistically restricted at 3 hours during the week, best case. So, you can only do that during the week. So that gives you Saturday, Sunday to do your long rides. Well, if I want to do, 6 to 8 hour rides, I now have to do those back to back, which isn't the end of the world, but isn't ideal, for recovery. If I'm doing a 6 hour ride or an 8 hour ride on Saturday, it is kind of asking a lot to have to do that again on Sunday. Like, it would be much nicer if you could do, Rico ride Monday, an 8 hour ride, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday with, some 3 to 4 hour rides in between. You have another recovery day Friday, and then you're able to hit it hard again on Saturday or Sunday. And, not only is your overall training volume better, but, you're able to hit those big rides more optimally. Preparation, bike work, when you're doing these kind of hours, like you're washing your bike more, you're waxing your chains more, you're changing tires more, you're just putting more wear and tear on your bike that requires more attention. that's something I'm limited with on time. If I have to ride 2, 3 hours after work, I'm not getting home till 7:30. It only gives me a couple hours before I have to go to bed to be able to do all that work on top of all my other chores and errands. And it's not that it's a lot of stuff. It's very minimal stuff. Your dishes, laundry, cleaning bathroom, kitchen, all that stuff. It's not that it necessarily takes a lot of time, but it's those 10 or 15-minute tasks that do add up, that do make it difficult when you are trying to train as much as I am and then also work. Like I said, time flexibility, preparation. I don't have a lot of time. I'm eating breakfast at work. I'm eating lunch at work, so I have to meal prep. I don't have the flexibility of waking up and just making breakfast, then making lunch, around my training schedule. And on top of that, I'm restricted on when I can ride. I only can ride in the afternoon. If it looks like it's going to be super bad weather in the afternoon, I can't ride in the morning, or vice versa. Like I can't sit around on my ass on a Monday or on a Saturday, Sunday and ride later in the afternoon because I might have to do chores or I might have other responsibilities to do in those afternoons. So once again, you're just limited in flexibility. And then lastly, you're limiting your recovery when you don't have as much time. Like no matter what, I have to be up and at work at 6:30. So if I'm struggling to go to sleep or something and would like to sleep in, I can't. So you're restricted on that. You just don't have that flexibility when you do have to work that 9 to 5. And I'm not the only one. I had some comments on my previous video talking about it, and it's something we all, or probably the majority do have to deal with. But it's still a reality. It's still tough for everybody, and we're all just trying to make it work. We're all trying to take that next step, but it's hard. Like you're trying to extract everything you can out of yourself while also balancing everything else in your life, and it's definitely a difficult balance. Kind of having to figure out what's worth it for you. I don't have the answer. I struggle with it every year, every build, every block. What is that right balance? And I don't know. But we're trying to make it work. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, if I didn't love it. And that's where we're at. So those are all the topics I wanted to touch on. Kind of going over just what the plan is for Unbound, and also just trying to be a privateer. And yeah, hopefully it was insightful. Hopefully it kind of gives you a bit more of a look into what I'm dealing with, what many other privateers are dealing with, or just wannabe pros. So maybe you'll give us a bit more grace as we complain in our Instagram post, because I can assure you my lack of complaining, or I will not have any lack of complaining over the next few weeks. But remember, I'm choosing to do this, and I love to do this. So you can have a little bit of grace, but definitely still pick on me in the comments. But that's it. That's really all I got. After this, we'll start getting into the Unbound build. So looking forward to that. Like I said, hopefully this video is insightful. We will touch back here soon, probably the next week or so, as we start getting ready to prepare for Unbound, start the Unbound training block, and we'll go from there. So if you haven't already, like and subscribe. Appreciate everyone for watching. Talk to you soon.